Have you ever thought about why you tip the way you do? Was it because of the quality of service, societal norms, or maybe even the intense eye contact you made with the cashier? Hi, my name is Sadhana, and I'm currently a junior at Doherty Valley High School, and today I'm here to talk to you about my research on tipping culture, nudges, and the idea of fearing judgment and how these concepts impact our financial decisions. Nudges are subtle cues or reminders that influence our behavior in a particular direction without restricting our choices or even changing the underlying incentives. For example, placing the most expensive foods at eye level in a grocery store is a nudge that encourages people to purchase the most expensive version of a product. Nudges can be identified by looking for small changes in the environment or presentation of options that steer people towards certain choices without removing their freedom of choice. Along the same lines exist defaults. Defaults refer to preset options or choices that individuals are presented with in a given situation. For example, in the United States, when Americans are registering for licenses, they enter their preference for whether or not they want to be organ donors. However, the default is to not be an organ donor. And for this reason, there are not enough organ donors to keep up with the demand in the United States, unlike in other European countries. Similarly, nudges and defaults can be applied to tipping as well. Tipping is a ubiquitous part of our lives, but it's also a complex social behavior that can be influenced by many factors. In my research, I found that people's tipping behavior can be nudged by subtle social cues. But why do these nudges work? It turns out that they tap into our fear of feeling judged, the idea that our behavior is being observed and evaluated by others, which led to the development of my thesis that the act of tipping is a complex behavior that is influenced by various factors, including societal norms, cultural practices, personal beliefs, and economic considerations. One crucial aspect that affects tipping is defaults and nudges. But why did I get interested in this? In the last year, I began working in the food and service industry as a cashier. And after doing some research on the topic, I began to notice some correlations between my attentiveness to customers while tipping and the amount they tipped. So I decided to put it to the test. My hypothesis was that if customers feel that they are being judged, they will tip more. And my experimental design was as follows. The data collection was conducted over several 5-hour shifts on Friday nights, the busiest night of the week. One thing to note was the actual labor itself of the employees packaging and decorating the cookies for the customers was done right in front of them so that they can see it in real time. Another thing to note is that when it's time to pay, the iPad, which is essentially the cash register, is turned towards the customers and they are given 5 options to tip. 4 big circles with tip amounts, 10%, 15%, 25%, and custom amount. Beneath it is a small button that says no tip. Based on the structure of the tipping system itself, the customers are essentially being given the default to choose a tip through the way it's structured, and the default is some sort of tip amount. In fact, they're also being nudged simply by the design of the screen itself. Coming to the experiment itself, during the first 2 hours of my shift, I paid attention to the customers as they selected the tip amount. In essence, I made sure not to avert my gaze. This was the experimental group. During the remaining 3 hours of each shift, I tested what was considered the control group. For this group, I either averted my eyes, went to go help a fellow employee, or cleaned something around me. Results showed that the average tipping amount when I paid attention averaged at approximately 15.1%, while when I averted my eyes, the tips averaged at 9%. The discrepancy was 6.1%. And while this number might seem like a small amount in comparison to the 100% each sale earns a company, a loss of tips in this magnitude can build up and lead to significant losses over time, simply caused by the inattentiveness or attentiveness of the cashier. This led me to question how this fear of being judged can also impact our financial decisions more broadly. Have you ever felt pressure to save money or invest in something because of social norms or expectations? My research shows that these feelings of accountability and motivation can be powerful drivers of financial behavior, but they can also create pressure and anxiety in situations like tipping. So, what can we do with this knowledge? By understanding the interplay between tipping culture, nudges, and the fear of being judged, we can design interventions and policies that nudge people towards better financial outcomes while minimizing the negative effects of social pressure. Whether it's setting up automatic saving plans, publicly announcing financial goals, or even simply being aware of the nudges around us, we can all nudge ourselves towards being more financially fit. Thank you. And special shout out to my mentor, Eli. I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank
No
you
worries.
so much. We do have a few questions. So, in addition to watching customers while they are selecting a tip amount, what are some other nudges which can be employed to incentivize tipping?
One other nudge that I think personally from my experience that could be employed to increase tipping would also just be instead of having the iPad turn towards them at the last moment, have them go through the entire transaction, or maybe even switching the default of the way the screen is fit. So maybe instead of having 10%, 15%, 25%, start it at like 20%,
Mhm.
25%, and go all the way up to 30. So in the beginning itself, the customers are seeing that, oh, like the general tipping amount is 15%. So I want to be on the higher end of the spectrum. So I'm going to tip at 20 or 25% or even 30%.
Very cool. And then how does the or yeah, how does the likelihood to tip change across industries? So like barista versus waitress versus like ice cream cashier.
I think there are a lot of confounding variables that there are to consider in these situations. I think first off, in each industry, there's like a different extent to which the customers can see how much labor is being done, especially like when you're waitressing. There's the customer gets to see in real time, like how you're running around the entire restaurant, going to the back of the kitchen to get all your food. So that like increases the likelihood to tip even more. But it just is very reliant on the amount of work or labor that the customer sees you do.
Um, okay, cool. I just got another question in, I believe. So how can someone who doesn't have the same real life opportunity as you conduct this research in a similar manner?
To conduct something like this in a similar manner, there are many different ways, and I think one option that I considered whether this would not, because I had to talk to my manager first and make sure to get approval from them before conducting
Yeah.
the study.
Yeah.
So my alternative to this without doing it in store was actually doing like an online form. And while this would be just asking potential customers about so like the question would be formatted something like, if the cashier made eye contact with you or was paying attention to you while you're tipping, are you more likely to tip or not? And that's like one way the question would be formatted. That's one way I could have done it. However, I feel like the real experience with where you're having that real time interaction would be lost in translation. And a lot of people, while they think they know what they would do, they don't really know until they're put in that situation. So while this is another way to do it, I just felt that it wouldn't be as effective and was really glad that it worked out the way it did.
Totally. Cool. And I guess my last question is what advice would you give to any other student just starting research on this topic?
I think one big advice I would give to anyone starting research on this topic is really get to know, or really notice those nudges and defaults around you because they're everywhere. And I had noticed so many of them in my life without even realizing it. And then as soon as the definition hit me and came up on my screen, I was like, whoa, like those have always been there and I just never realized. So definitely like, finding those real life examples is really eye opening and will definitely help further research.